I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I'm Shelby Sparrow.
And I'm Lisa Prosnitz. On behalf of the Lower Merion School District Interschool Council, Shelby and I would like to welcome you to the 2021 virtual Lower Merion School District Board of School Directors Candidate Forum. We are live on Merion TV and want to thank their student technical director, Adam Gilbert, for assisting us. Tonight's forum was organized by the League of Women Voters of Lower Merion and Narberth and the Interschool Council, with support from the Committee for Special Education, the NAACP Mainline Branch, Merion TV, and the district's Power and Becton Scholars. Members of the Lower Merion and Merion High School speech and debate teams also helped organize the forum and will be moderating. The ISC is a parent guardian volunteer organization that connects the district's 10 homeschool associations and, among other things, hosts parent ed events, hot topics every second Tuesday, and mini grant programs for our educators. For more information, please write to isc.copresidents@gmail.com or visit lmsd.org and find us under the parent tab on the website. We thank all the candidates for participating tonight and also thank Jamie Mogul and Karen Shapiro from the League for their dedication to helping make this event a success. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Jamie Mogul, President of the League of Women Voters of Lower Merion and Narberth. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa, and thank you to everybody joining in and watching tonight, especially to the student moderators, the timekeeper, and everybody. It's really an honor to be here and to have organized this event. I just want to say a special thank you to Shelby and Lisa and to the entire ISC on behalf of the League of Women Voters. We are so grateful for your commitment to the Lower Merion School District community. And we're lucky to have you, Shelby and Lisa, as members of the League also. And to the students, as I said, thank you so much for helping tonight. I just want to point out that the League is a nonpartisan organization, so we neither support nor oppose candidates. We strive to engage and inform the electorate through events just like this, School Board Candidate Forum. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for all the election updates as we enter another election season. You can find us at LWVLMN or find us online at lwvlmn.org. This entire forum is being recorded. We are here in Zoom with the candidates, moderators, and timekeeper. The recording will be available on Merion TV as well as the League's YouTube channels, and we'll be sure to share that out for those of us who couldn't join live tonight. The recording must be shown in its entirety. Clips cannot be used for partisan political advantage. We want to remind people that the deadline for registering is fast approaching on October 18th. Please make sure that your registration is up to date. Don't wait on that. You can go to vote.pa.gov and please make a plan to vote. You can do that at the League's trusted nonpartisan resource, vote411.org, where you can see all the candidates and learn more about them, especially those running tonight, as well as key state judicial races, including those for Pennsylvania's top appellate courts. And we just want to remind you, your vote is your voice and your voice matters, your vote matters. And now I'm going to turn it over to the students and very interested to hear what they and the candidates have to say tonight. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Rose Weathers, and I, along with Faco Toika, Matthew Eichen, and Jack Shapiro, all leaders of Lower Merion and Merion speech and debate teams, will serve as moderators for the evening. There are 8 candidates who are running for 4 seats over 4-year terms, which will begin in December. We solicited questions from students, parents, and the community, and we thank you for being involved. Questions were formulated with your submissions in mind and reflects the issues that you wanted to be asked.
The format of the evening will be as follows. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement in a randomly pre-assigned order. There will then be 8 rounds of questions. Each round contains 2 questions. Each question will be asked to 4 candidates, again, in a randomly assigned order for each round. Responses will be limited to 90 seconds. Candidates will be made aware of the time via our timekeeper, Alana James, who is with us on Zoom. She will signal the candidates when there are 30 seconds left and when their time is up. Candidates have been made aware when they see the signal to stop, they must complete their sentence and must stop.
Each candidate has 2 30-second chits that may be used to either extend their current response or respond to a question that they were not asked. Chits cannot be used for rebuttals. The candidates have been informed and are aware they must visibly raise their hand to cue us they are using a chit and wait to be acknowledged by a moderator before beginning so that the timekeeper can set their allotted time.
The final section will be closing statements of 2 minutes by each candidate, again predetermined by random drawing. We would like to note that we have asked the candidates to please not mention the names of students or other minors while speaking in order to preserve their confidentiality. Thank you.
Now we will begin opening statements. Again, each candidate has 1 minute. First, Carrie Saunter.
Hello, my name is Dr. Curry Sotner. Thank you, student leaders. As the Chief Learning Officer, I have built vital leadership practices in education, in civic engagement, and in civil discourse and dialogue techniques. As a parent of 2 children in our schools and a professional educator for the last 23 years, I am passionate about the importance of excellent public schools for all children, regardless of background, ability, or geographic location. I'm an advocate for inclusive education, and I'm a believer in supporting our teachers with the tools and resources they need to reach all of our kids and keep and hold high expectations for every single one of our learners. I encourage you to check out our website at votelmsd.org, where you can connect with me or my other slate mates for a deeper conversation. Know that these 3 principles hold us as guiding lights for our work in the years to come. Students first, community collaboration, and we will never stop in the pursuit of equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Brendan Salmon.
Hi, I'm Brendan Salmon, a professor at St. Joseph's University and a resident of the Penguin area of Lower Merion. Right now, our school board is in need of becoming more effective at creating communities of trust and becoming itself a trustworthy institution that serves all communities that make up Lower Merion. My candidacy puts this need at the center. As I've learned in my work with persons with disabilities, as a father of 2 children, one with Down syndrome at Lower Merion High School, and as a husband to an immigrant wife, the most effective way to build communities of trust is not by fiat, by force, or by guilt, but by helping the beauty of a community to become more visible for those who can't yet see that beauty. One primary element involved in this beauty is helping to raise up voices that have been voiceless. In regard to the school board, this involves 3 primary elements: better transparency in order to create trust in the school board's voice, availability to better amplify the voice of the students and parents we serve, and a curriculum that encourages and incentivizes the beauty of diverse approaches to all the fields of inquiry that constitute that curriculum. All of this constitutes the foundation for my candidacy for school board. Thanks.
Thank you. Travis Kreisner.
Good evening. Thanks to all the organizers for setting up this event and to all who have tuned in tonight to learn a little bit more about each of the candidates. My name is Travis Kreisner. I've lived in Lower Merion Township for more than 20 schools. I ask that you consider voting for me as a school director so that we can add a measure of diversity to the board. Excuse me. Yes, diversity. And when I say diversity, I'm talking about true diversity, meaning diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and diversity of approach in the way the school district approaches the education process. The best decisions are only achieved when all opinions and options are considered and tested by competing views. All too often, I think the board has made less than optimum decisions because the board has been comprised of people who view the world through the same lens. It's not about changing minds so much as it is about achieving the best decisions for our children. I and a fellow candidate met with a parent group a few weeks back, and I heard more than once from a parent representative, well, I never thought about it that way. I'm confident the current board would find itself in the same position if I were elected a director. Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie Schaffmeister.
Thank you to our hosts, sponsors, the school debate team, and community members who are or will be watched this forum. As you heard, I'm Melanie Schaffmeister, and I'm part of the Democratic slate who's running for school board. I've been involved in the school and the district since my daughter started kindergarten, and she is now in 12th grade at Lower Merion High School. I've had many roles, including HSA president and president of the Interschool Council. I'm also very active in the community as a current director on Merion Civic Association and just finished my tenure last year as president. Professionally, I spent over 15 years in Central University grants and contract offices, which immersed me in policy, procedures, and budgetary oversight. I'm an avid supporter of public education, and LMSD is the reason we moved here. It's the reason why so many of us move here. And I believe in them putting our students first. We can do the best by building trust in our community through transparency and collaboration. I want to help set that course so that all LMSD students have a rewarding and equitable academic experience. And I thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Kimberly Garrison.
Good evening, and thank you to everyone who's hosting this event. I'm Kimberly Garrison, and I'm excited to be running for the Board of Education here in Lower Merion. I would be honored if you were to vote for this slate. We connected right away as a group, and we are committed to help move the district forward with fresh ideas, better communication, and transparency to build trust. As a parent of one child who attends the LMSD public schools, like you, education is certainly a priority for me. We have lived in Lower Merion for over 14 years and have volunteered in many capacities locally, as well as spearheaded a couple of community organizations that support families and children. My volunteer work and my contributions in the classroom have only increased my passion about the quality of education of all of our children. I've always been an active parent and participant in the community and have been progressively taking on more significant roles. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Mary Brown.
Thank you, everyone, for organizing, and thank you to everyone who's attending through recording later or presently. And thank you to the students who are very, very special. So I have been teaching for 48 years. I taught for 32 years at Harrington and Lower Merion. My husband and I have raised 5 children through Lower Merion schools. It's almost every single school our kids have attended. We also have been very active in the community through Rosemont Villanova Civic Association Sports and now Narberth AA. I love Lower Merion. My children would not be where they are today without the dedication of the teachers, the administration and the staff, and our entire community. I'm also the president of the children's school, president of the board of the children's school in Balkan, the children's school at St. John's. And I've learned a lot from parents whose children are enrolled about some of the concerns that we have. And there are concerns in Lower Merion. I believe that through relationships built between the school board and the commissioners, we can resolve conflicts early through dialogue, through respect, through careful listening. That is one of the ways in which I, as a teacher, have spent my career, and I have seen the benefits of no rancor, positive, and even loving care as we give examples to our children who are so dear to us. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Anna R. Shurak.
Thanks so much, Rose. My name is Anna Shurak, she, her, hers, and I'm honored to be here tonight. I'm a career educator who has served at every level of the system, which gives me a unique perspective and expertise to help shepherd in this new age of schooling in a time like none other. I'm a Lower Merion resident and parent of 2 elementary age students. In coming together with my slate mates, we have a strong alliance and are clearly committed to anti-racism, student, stakeholder engagement, and accountability. Knowing the path ahead and all that we must accomplish in our district, we are building on a foundation of much opportunity and success. And I am confident if the four of us are elected, we will only complement those who are already on the school board and be able to create the change our community aspires for. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the issues tonight, and thank you for voting for our slate.
And thank you. Now we have Christina Fink.
Hello, Lower Merion. Thank you everyone for inviting me to this and for organizing this. Thank you to the students. My name is Christina Fink. I've been a resident of Lower Merion for 30 years. I have 3 sons. They all went through Lower Merion schools. I had a son who was on an IEP the entire time. I have a child who was in the gifted program, and I have a good average student. My husband was graduated from Lower Merion High School, so we have a long history of being Lower Merion residents. I'm a moderate Republican, and I'm married to a Democrat. So I tell you, I love working with people of different opinions. I have worked in big corporate, managing multi-million-dollar sectors of their business. I also run my own small business in residential leasing, and I own a farm in Montgomery County that raises holistically and sustainably grass-fed beef. So I have a lot of skills that I think are lacking on the board right now that could be useful to Lower Merion. I love children. I love education. I am a constant learner myself, and I really am excited about the possibilities of improving our education for all of our children here in Lower Merion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we will begin round 1, and this is our first round of questions. All 8 candidates will answer one of 2 questions in this round. Again, candidates may use their 2 chits to answer a question they have not been assigned or to extend their time on an answer. The questions in this round pertain to student health and wellness. The 4 candidates who will be answering this question are Travis Kreiser, Mary Brown, Melanie Schaffmeister, and Christina Fink. So here's the question. Almost a third of the many questions we received from the community pertain to implementing healthy school start times as recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. For 7+ years, much of the community has advocated for this change. In spring of 2020, the Lower Merion School Board approved a resolution to change the high school start time from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., but specifically linked this approval to installation of permanent lights on Arnold Field, an issue that is tied up in litigation. The first question, what is your position on healthy school start times? If in favor, are you willing to implement a solution for what remains a significant concern for the community, despite the previous resolution regarding Arnold Field lights? How would you approach this issue? First, we have Travis Kreiser.
Thank you. Yes, I'm aware of the issue. I know that it has been discussed for a long time. I'm in favor of changing the start times, as I think they've put a lot of time and effort into studying the issue, and it's been established that for many of the high school students, a later start time would improve their high school performance. I'm also aware that there's a lot of opposition to lighting Arnold Field across from Lower Merion High School. This is one of the problems, I think, that goes to the way Lower Merion School District often makes its decisions, and that is they make the decisions first and then look for community consensus and community buy-in later. And I don't think we have enough community involvement on the front end. So if that was going to be an issue, I would hope that we would have met with those living around Arnold Field and got their consensus and buy-in beforehand. I think that's really the way that we're going to solve a lot of problems, which is inviting more community involvement on the front end rather than trying to force pre-made decisions, which often end up in this school district in litigation with costly attorneys that end up, diverting education dollars away from education. And speaking more specifically to that, the school board meetings, the way they're set up, provide very little time for real discussion of any issues. If you've ever gone to a school board meeting, each community participant, each individual is given very few seconds to speak about anything. We need to find a way to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Mary Brown.
Of course, healthy sleep is important to students I have, again, been teaching since 1974, so this is not a new concern of mine. I believe that athletics also are very important for the students. My husband and I are very involved with Narberth Athletic Association flag football. Right now, we've got 420 kids playing, and it's so important as an offset to the stressors of COVID and the teaching learning adjustments that we've seen. So I'm an advocate of healthful start times. And I know that Radnor has implemented an 8:30, approximately 8:30, because my granddaughters go there. So it can be done. Another way of looking at it is to think about the credit system in the high school at Lower Merion and Harriton. There might be some possibility that we can do super credit courses so that students aren't responsible for 8 periods in the school day. And I think that we can be more creative about that. Regarding the lights, I run that football clinic every May at Lower Merion High School. So you know that I care about football, and my 2 younger sons of the 5 kids played Lower Merion football. So I understand why Friday night lights are important. There's a social opportunity. Now, I want to point out that in this district, Tom Ferguson from Harriton High School arranged for temporary lights for specific games. And that might be a solution. Travis, you mentioned really communicating with the neighbors, some of whom I know and are very adamant about no lights. But there is possible compromise. And again, if we think about the tradition of Friday nights and the compromise which Tom Ferguson was able to strike with the community up in Rosemont, Villanova, we had temporary lights for specific games. So maybe that's a solution.
Thank you. Now we have Melanie Schaffmeister.
Yeah, Sleep and Start is something that is dear to my heart. As a mother of a very sleepy teenager right now, as an IAC president, I planned 6 years ago a meeting about sleep and start times, and it was our most well attended meeting of the year. And the research's clear. We've got to do it. But the question is how, and this is not this is not something that you can just throw money at and fix. We have been dealing with an enrollment issue in the district, which has impacted it being able to be started. But we need to think out of the box. One question I have is meetings that I've heard is that we have the longest school district in Pennsylvania. Why? Is there a way we can shorten it? And then look at different ways that we can balance between the busing. It's all about the busing and sports. And the other thing is, we have 60% of the kids in school play sports, and it's very important to them and for their emotional well-being. So we need to look at different ways. I want to see what sports need to practice on the field and need the lights. I do know that from our zoning code and the agreements that were made, we can't have temporary lights on the field. So we need to either can we approach township and talk to them, but I think there needs to be collaboration, with the neighbors. I agree with that. And we need to think outside the box and how we can look at the school day. Can it be reorganized? Can we shorten it? And so I think it needs a lot more to look at, but we need to move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Christina Fink.
Hello, everyone. I don't think there's a lot more to say on this. I actually agree with every one of the other candidates in terms of what they spoke about. I do want to mention that I have over the years heard from quite a few parents who do rely on their older children to get home first in order to take their younger children off the bus. We don't want to be arrogant in this school district just because there are so many well-heeled families and families with extra money to buy childcare when there are plenty of parents that really do rely on the family, meaning the older children, to take care of the younger children when they get off the bus. That has been something that I believe we tend to gloss over. The science is clear. The children do need more sleep time. I support the right lighting to make sure that we have the athletics, because my my children and my sons, especially my son who was on the IEP, he needed to get out there and be athletic in order to clear his mind and for his emotional well-being. I think sports and activity enhances the mind. It's not just all about academics and how your mind works, it's how your body and your mind work together. And that is all makes for a more healthy child and a healthy community. So I really support everything that the other candidates said, and I think we really should be able to get this done. We just have to continue to charge forward and figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for answering the first question. Okay, so question number 2. The 4 candidates who will be answering this question are Kimberly Garrison, Anna Shurak, Brendan Salmon, and Carrie Sautner. The second question: it's been well established that many of our high school students report feeling stressed, anxious, and exhausted. What do you propose doing to help alleviate the day-to-day stressors of our students, and how would you ensure that our students' mental health is properly cared for? First, we have Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for that question. I think that question dovetails nicely with the first one. First of all, people need proper sleep and proper nutrition to perform well, whether it's athletically or academically. So that would be the first thing, is to change that start time. No child should be in school at 7:30 in the morning. I think that's insane. I think that everyone should have an opportunity, even if they're not an athlete, to have some type of physical activity, be it yoga. I think yoga would be great. As a matter of fact, actually, you could do it in the classroom. You don't even have to change and go to the gym. Lifting weights, things that people have an opportunity to use their body. We're really missing out. A lot of kids are missing out on that, especially if they're not athletes. So I think combining rest and exercise and proper nutrition, those are the 3 key points for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Anna Shurak.
Thanks so much. So first things first is we have to listen to our high school students. So when students are sharing that they're stressed, anxious, and exhausted, we have to really grapple with the fact that students are navigating a world much different than us as adults have, and that what they're being pulled and expected to do does not meet the experience that we have. And much of the research shows that because of the negative stressors and additional pressures from social media and technology, that the ways in which students navigate the current world has to be modified, which comes into teaching practices and best practices in high school with a lot that allow for flexibility, support, and ongoing commitment and examination of our practices and how we are focused on that. I think we're off to a great start in a lot of ways in the elementary schools, and the ways in which mindfulness is taught starting in kindergarten through the implementation of programs. My questions lie in how does that continue, and how do we bring in the perspectives of our students to help guide the path forward, with also adding additional social emotional supports in the form of counselors and social workers and other teachers who have additional release time and schedules to help mitigate concerns of students proactively, so it's not as reactive. But first and foremost, we have to listen to our high school students and learn from them what will make the biggest difference in alleviating that stress, and go from there.
Thank you. And now we have Brendan Salmon.
Thanks for the question. I guess I would probably start by gently questioning the premise of the question and just ask, to what extent can a school board even do something like that? And the reason I do that is because I'm concerned that if a school board becomes too occupied with being too invasive, it actually ends up creating more anxiety for teachers, for administrators, that then gets thrust down onto the students. So secondly, to the extent that a school board can affect the well-being of its students in all these different domains, and again, I'd be very careful about that. I would stress the principle of subsidiarity, and I would find ways to ensure that our teachers are being cared for, And I would also make myself and hopefully the board available to parents because they're also involved in this. Listening to students is of course important, but we are in a community here. And if we're going to build trust, and trust is, I think, the antidote to so much of the anxiety students are feeling these days. There's just a cloud of mistrust settling upon our social order. And a lot of that is because there are people who are very power hungry and they want to control other people's lives. I am not one such person. I would want to build communities that subsidiarily take care of each other, granting a freedom of those first, let's say, line people like teachers, parents, to take care of the students, to help students where they need to be helped, to give a voice to the students, to express their help, but to also avoid overstepping our bounds as a school board. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we have Carrie Sautner.
So at the school board and students, when we think about our student stresses, I mean, I am so grateful that students put this in as a question. So that means there are questions coming from our parents and our community to the school board and says, school board, how will you lead and help our students through this unbelievable time? I think we need to listen. And that is number one and first. The school board's job is to be leadership, is to write policies and work with the leadership team at the school to make these policies go into practice. So I very much think it is the job of the school board to engage and put our students first, listening to them, absolutely, creating healthy environments, using the idea that we can formulate and understand an approved curriculum that is based off of discourse, dialogue, community building, inclusion, and mindfulness. That is the job of the school board and a hugely important one. But putting students first should always be everybody in the school board's job. It's really important, the SEL and all the other programs that come to our community and comes to the school board. But we also need to understand what are the academic pressures that we as a school board are approving in that curriculum that are beneficial for our students, and what are the ones that are not beneficial for our students? How much pressure do we need to put on our kids to ensure that they have a well-rounded life? What do they want? What do they need? What careers and bountiful careers can they move forward with and really achieve the best that they can achieve with the needs they have? And we should always listen.
Thank you. Okay, and now we have Christina Fink using her chit.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very important topic, and I agree with what everybody has said, but I want to mention a few additional things. The first thing, we can really be a leader and think outside the box on this. There's a ton of research coming out about phones, and there are quite a few specialists and experts saying we should put the phones away from bell to bell. Those children in every one of our schools should lock the phone when they come in the door. They should not have any access to the phone except for maybe during lunch. And it will significantly reduce the stressors and the mental well-being of the children because they get to peacefully involve themselves in school. We also want no politics. I think that is really entering the school, and we want to have readings and teachings that are joyful and cheerful. I don't think there's enough joy and happiness that is being discussed in classrooms. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. We would now like to begin the second round of questions. The topic for this round will be the roles and responsibilities of board members. The four candidates that will be answering the first question in this round are going to be Kimberly Garrison, Mary Brown, Carrie Sautner, and Travis Kreiser. The first question is as follows. Please share your vision and priorities for the school district. After the 4 years of your term, what is the mark or message you wish to leave? And first, we will be hearing from Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for that question. I would say that the mark that I would like to leave after 4 years on the district, on the school board, but that we have a more harmonious community, that we are really serving our students' needs, all of our students, not just our high achieving students and not just our athletes, but really focusing in on the issues around equity and giving all of the students, no matter where their backgrounds are, the kind of education they need to have the successful life that they would like to have and careers. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we will hear from Mary Brown.
I'll start with a vignette. As I said, I sponsor the Lower Merion Football Clinic, and I've been doing that since 2008. Of course, we were interrupted with COVID. And I spend time with senior football players as part of this project and a community service. So we do go to the elementary schools and talk to the kids. And in those conversations with the Lower Merion students, I ask them, what can they do? And some of the students feel that they can't do anything. And that is the start of a conversation for all of us in the community, whether we're candidates or not, whether we're school board members or not. I believe that we should broaden and in some way glamorize the technical education component of Lower Merion School District. We do not have, as far as I can tell, a contract with Central Manco Technical High School. And I think we pay per student to go. And I have a young friend who's studying carpentry at the Central Manco Technical High School, which I visited several times. And I think that Kimberly's right. Not all kids are top achievers, and not all students have the wherewithal to go to a four-year college or to start and finish. And my goal after 4 years, if I were fortunate and privileged enough to be elected to serve with the school board for all of us, would be to make sure that we have done more for every student to realize some type of occupation, some means of making a living that is respectable, that is worthwhile, and we can do that. And I believe that if we look at the credit system, the way we have it structured in cooperation with the state, because all school board members are also liable to the state, responsible to the state, we can look at the curriculum.
Your time has expired.
That's
Thank you
good.
so much. Please be aware of the time, candidates.
All right, thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Carrie Sotner.
So vision. Vision, we start with, vision's a big word. I love that you guys started with that question. So when I think about the vision I have for the school board, I think about how do we build a more inclusive community? And that means in every aspect of our process, in our curriculum, in the policy we write, but also in the way we engage all of the community. We want to engage the students, we want to engage the parents, but we also live in a community with so many other people that don't have that direct connection to the schools. And we need to engage that community as well. We need to have that stakeholder engagement the entire way through and build things together. The vision is set high, it's set together, and it's set for all of us. But then we think about how do we bring that down to reality and what's the job of the school board? We need to build a trust with the community and the district. We need to build stakeholder engagement tactics. We need to build ways to communicate with the whole community and not just the loudest people, but all the people. And we need to build milestones, outputs, and outcomes that are measurable. So then we as a school board are held accountable. Our job is to set policy and to set goals that we need to hit as an institution and to measure off of them that are transparent for all of us to engage with, to see where we are and where we're going together. So when I leave this school board, I want to make sure that there's no bump in the road. A great leader is one that leads and then works with others so the system works properly, not just the people.
All right, thank you. The final response to this question will come from Travis Kreiser.
Thanks. Yeah, a couple of things I think are real important to focus on moving forward. One would be something that's talked about a little bit already by myself and others, which is more community involvement, more community buy-in in a way to have the community more of a partner in making decisions as we go forward. Also, going back to one of the earlier questions that we had is about student health and well-being and how they feel about their school experience. One of the things I think that we lack severely at Lower Merion, especially in the high schools, is any sense of school spirit or community spirit. You come to a football game or a sporting event or a musical performance, you see very few people there, you'll see very few students there, and at sporting events, even home games, you'll see very few Lower Merion students, and you'll see tons of students from the opposing team there to support their students. we have this culture in our high schools, which really focuses a lot on competition. Competition is great. It's what makes people perform at a high level. But I'd like to see more where we have events where the students come together and not focus on what separates them, but what joins them together, which is we're all Lower Merion students. We're here to cheer on our school. We're here to enjoy something together that's different than or in addition to the educational experience they have. And part of the stress that our students achieve and a culture that we need to change is they focus too much on getting into a college. They all think that they have to get into an Ivy League school. And if they make one mistake in one test, that their entire life is going to be ruined. This is what adds to a lot of stress. And we need to develop a culture that changes that. Thanks.
Thank you. We will now move on to the second question in this round. The four candidates who will be answering this question are Christina Fink, Brendan Salmon, Melanie Schaffmeister, and Anna Schurig. The second question goes as follows. Most believe that school board members should neither be rubber stamps nor micromanagers. If elected, you'll be one vote on a 9-person board. How do you propose to provide the necessary checks and balances for your fellow school board directors and for the administration of our school district? First, we will be hearing from Christina Fink.
Hello. Okay, well, I do think the school board is supposed to set direction, and they're supposed to help set policy, and then they're supposed to be visionaries, along with the educational experts that we're supposed to be hiring that are in our administration, and then also hand in hand with what's supposed to be a spectacular group of teachers that will tell us what's going on the ground all the time in the classroom. So I think our school board right now, I think, is pretty disconnected from the teachers. And I think our school board doesn't have the proper set of skills on it so that we can fully understand what our administrators are being charged with leading so that we can have checks and balances on them. And so I think we need to be more multifaceted as a school board member on understanding what's going on the ground, getting to schools, seeing what's happening there, talking to the students, and then hearing from the administration and the teachers as to what they need in order to have a fantastic school district and create a wonderful educational experience. And then we should be sitting back and trying to massage all that data and saying, here's what we're hearing, and here's how we envision we can be a better school district for everybody. So I think that's what we're missing. We're really missing sort of the tentacles that go out and then come back and then sort of look at everything from 30,000 feet and then bring it down to 15,000 feet and then go down to the ground level. And I think that would allow us to provide checks and balances. I also think we need to challenge our fellow school board members more aggressively to make sure that we are thinking of best practices. I don't think we do that enough because I think right now most of the
Thank you.
board
Your
members
time has expired.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Brendan Salmon.
So I think one way to ensure a better and more effective checks and balances is to vote some other parties onto the school board. This already ensures that the one party rule, which allows for kind of behind closed doors decisions to be made, and then a kind of artificial conversation to be had, already sort of provides an impetus for that, number one. Number two, as a professor in the classroom, I've had to learn to navigate between various perspectives, and I find a real delight in that. I love hearing perspectives that are challenging. I love hearing perspectives that are quite different from my own, but I also love them because I am not afraid to firmly challenge them myself with a kind of openness that enables both parties, all parties involved, to kind of achieve a higher understanding of each of their positions. This requires creating communities of trust, as I've already said. It also requires transparency on the part of the board to be willing to hear the parents when they do come to board meetings and to really listen to them. And then it requires availability, allowing board members to make themselves known, to make their presence known, so that parents throughout the district and teachers are not afraid to approach them, knowing that there is an authentic engagement with the community and not one that is just done sort of post facto after all the right decisions have been made as according to sort of one mind of one political party. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Melanie Schaffmeister.
Thanks. As a board member, I look at this, I think we need to go back to that thing of vision. You have to have a clear vision. And when you're working with the rest of the other members of the school board, it's good to have a good, hearty conversation about differences, but we need to really understand you can't just go on one view of when you're voting on anything or when you're due expected. You need to gather different perspectives before you. So for when I think I want to really understand an issue, I don't want to just quickly push through an issue. I want to understand an issue. And that's when you understand an issue and can explain that issue and talk it out with your board member, with the rest of the board. That's when we can keep each other's perspectives and expand our perspectives and promote some dialogue that we can then decide, come to a conclusion, because we're responsible for for driving the fiscal and educational policies of the district. And we need to work with the superintendent and have a good relationship with them as they bring the administration and the teachers things back to us. We need to talk, and we need to talk if it's affecting the community. That means having a conversation with the community and bringing those views back to the table, because we're only one voice, each one voice, but together we need to make a voice to move the district forward, but the right way forward, in support of our students first, but also not forgetting our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Anna Shurak.
Thanks. So like Melanie said, it starts with clear policy and the role of the board in setting the system so that it works. It's similar to what Curry shared earlier, so that it works beyond whether the people are there or not. When I think about the purpose of the checks and balances and how as a school board director, I'd hold the superintendent accountable and work with my colleagues, I think a great case study is in the work that I've done with my slate mates collectively already. None of the four of us knew one another, and we absolutely don't agree on many issues. That makes our work that much stronger. And I think it's a test for what it takes to actually move work forward is building trust, being willing to listen to counter ideas, and be transparent about the learning. I'm positive that many things are discussed at the school board level. The board meeting on a public venue is not the place that, as a community, we're always going to hear about the different pieces that were discussed or considered. And that's where I think there's huge opportunity, not only to bring the community in to create more transparency, but also be realistic about the pulls on our time. As a working parent, there are many ways I'd like to be involved that how the system's currently constructed, I'm constrained and not able to. So I think we have a great opportunity to set many more systems in place to gather additional input, communicate the work that is being done, and have ongoing dialogue post individual board meetings as decisions are made, to not have static policies that defined our path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Brown has opted to use 1 30-second chit in order to respond to this question. Mary Brown.
Thank you. Everyone, we are encouraged that we have a new superintendent coming approximately October 15th, Khalid Mumin, and he is known for building community and for being in the community. One last point, Suba will be the only board director who has more than 2 years experience. So we really need to add people to the board who have lived really fully in Lower Merion, who have a lot of connections.
Thank you, Mary Brown. All right, we will now be moving on to the third round of questions. The topic for this round will be about communication and transparency. Transparency and active dialogue are key to building accountability and trust with the community. Also, recent changes to the Sunshine Laws specifically require key deliberations be done in open meetings, including board committees. The first question will be answered by Melanie Schaffmeister, Carrie Sotner, Kimberly Garrison, and Mary Brown. The question reads as follows. Please share your thoughts on the meaning and importance of transparency between the board of directors and with the community at large. And how would your participation on the board help foster a sense of transparency and trust? First, we will be hearing from Melanie Schaffmeister.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Yeah, transparency and trust and like building community. I mean, this is a common thing that's coming up with all of us, and it's one of the major reasons why I'm running. because we all moved to this, most of us moved to this district. When you sit in a room like IC meeting and you ask somebody to raise their hand, who moved here for the district, 90% of the people raise their hand. And I want to keep it that way. And then we can only do that with transparency and build trust with the community. And I believe that one of the ways is that we need to, have robust conversation in the meetings and the community meetings, but we also need to go out into the community for those of us who have time and talk with students, talk with the people in the community about, and not just about like the issues, just talk about school in general. What are you wanting to hear from them more than just people standing in and bring this back to have our discussions. And that we need to be open and transparent. I think we need to have our community, our committee meetings, online and recorded and be able to access, because a lot of times I can't make the meeting to the meeting because of work, and I want to be able to review it later. What's on the board docs is not always fully, you don't fully get the full meaning of what is being shown, and by hearing the conversation behind it, I think that is one major way that we can, as a board, be more transparent. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Carrie Sotner.
Transparency, active dialogue, listening, community trust. I love this question. I feel like this is my jam. I just did a summer teacher institute across the nation that trained teachers in this method, this work. I work with community leaders in Philadelphia, across the state, and across the nation for years doing this work. So I cannot wait to get my hands on this. And there's so many clear things that we need to do. We need to make sure that we have a clear and transparent process. So when we do come into engagement with our community, with our students, with everybody, we have all the voices at the table, and that everybody really understands how we're going to work through this and how are we going to have stakeholder engagement. We need to hold ourselves accountable as well. So if something does change, why? Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Let's listen to the community. And then how do we ensure that we have constant patterns of engagement? So if we do things a certain way, that people know what they are, why they're that way, and then we can have discussions about it. But making sure that people have access to the time, access to the engagement, that again, it's not just something you're getting off of Facebook with the loudest voice, but something that you're able to come to the table when it works for you in the way you want to work. And then we use data to help support our decisions. And we're transparent with all the data we have as well. So we can really have a community dialogue when the community can come, and then feed back all the voices of the community in surveys, evaluations, and research too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for that question. When I think about transparency and trust, the foundation for any positive relationship is based on those two things. You cannot have trust if you do not have transparency. Furthermore, as Curry just stated, all voices have to be at the table. And the more voices, the more diverse, the more transparency, and the more trust we're going to build by having more people at the table, more diverse opinions and backgrounds, in social economic backgrounds as well. It just can't be everyone from just one demographic being represented. So I think that that's the first thing, is having diverse voices and speaking honestly about what our issues are as well. Transparency and trust, they both go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Mary Brown.
I want to give credit to Amy Buckman and our school administration for their current efforts to inform all of us about what's going on. The website has a lot of information. And I do know that the superintendent's office has and will be, considering the timing of the committee meetings. Brendan, a lot of the work and the discussion goes during those committee meetings, and they're unfortunately 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I know the district is already looking at ways to vary times or record or whatever. The other is that we have in Lower Merion a coalition for youth of Lower Merion and Narberth. And of course, I've been a member for a long time, and we've been holding these conversations with students from Harriton and Lower Merion, no names, just what the students are experiencing. And the students themselves are speaking to all that we're talking about: the need for open communication, the need for diverse viewpoints, the need for trust, the need for building relationships. And we can do this. We can definitely do this.
Thank you. We will now be moving on to the second question in this round. The 4 candidates who will be answering this question are Christina Fink, Brendan Salmon, Travis Kreiser, and Anna Shurak. The second question reads as follows. We received many questions and concerns from parent and community members that the school board decisions lack sufficient public deliberation. How would you respond to these questions and concerns? And how would you encourage optimal board dialogue at public meetings when challenging decisions need to be made? First, we will hear from Christina Fink.
Okay, I mean, this is a big issue. It's been a big issue for a while. A lot of the community feels that the school board is very arrogant in their culture and that they sort of have an issue. They decide on most of it, how to get it done, and then they just sort of bring the community in at the end, and then the community gets very angry. So the first thing is that I do think we need to have liaisons from the various sectors of the community. Maybe every single ward would have a community liaison where every month or every other month or every quarter, if that was enough, we have to determine the school board really needs to report to each of them as to what's going on that might impact not only the entire Lower Merion, but also their community, such as the building of the middle school. And therefore, that community is warned way ahead of time, something that's going to be going down in their community, and then they log that that happens. I think we have to come up with a different structure to allow the communication to happen, because it has not been happening, and it hasn't been happening for over a decade. And this is the same question because I'm a perennial candidate, right? I've been here every 2 years for how many times, and it's the same question every single time. We never seem to be able to fix it. So I think we need to look way outside the box, and we need to change the times that we meet so that the community can be involved. We need to have liaisons where the board must report to the liaisons so that they're aware, and then we need to come up with ways of communicating and gathering information before, quote, the decision is already set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Brendan Salmon.
Thanks so much for that question. One practical thing that I think we could consider, because everyone, rightfully is speaking about thinking outside the box. Here's one that's pretty outside the box. Currently, commissioners are voted locally per district. The school board is voted at large by everybody. And so you might get a cluster of people from, say, Gladwin that make decisions for more densely populated areas, densely populated because they are, of course, less luxurious, less costly to live in, like my area, Penwyn. We might want to consider having 14 board members, one from each district, which would definitely ensure a better promulgation of decisions, because then you could actually have a member of each district going back to their communities and representing them appropriately. This would also disperse the power and would prevent corruption from actually happening. And it would involve more voices. And this is really the key, is to get voices that have not been heard to be heard. So I think doing something like that, actually thinking about changing the way we actually vote for this board, is something that if we're going to think outside the box, that's something we might want to consider. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we will be hearing from Travis Kreiser.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know my own personal experience, there are a couple of issues that I came across with an issue I had with my daughter about 2 years ago, where I had an issue I felt it needed to be addressed. And it was an issue that went beyond my daughter. It was an issue that plenty of students were facing. I tried to approach the high school administration and was told it had to be addressed through the superintendent's office. And I tried to get in contact with the superintendent. Of course, you couldn't get a return call. You couldn't even really get a dialogue going. The only thing that happened was I could make my issue known in writing, and I got back a no with really no explanation, not from the superintendent, not from anyone on the board. And I also tried to reach out to someone on the board who we know personally, because at the time, and up until recently, the school board members, the school directors did not have a way to contact them. They did not have published emails. So you couldn't even contact them to raise an issue. But what I got back from the superintendent was no explanation. It really made you feel as if your concern and your issue was not considered. And that's not a way to be transparent or to make people trust in the decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will be hearing, Melanie Schaffmeister has elected to use one of our 30-second chits. Melanie, you have 30 seconds to speak.
Oh, I just want to make a clarification that the 9 school board members is state mandated. So that would have to go to the state level to get approval to do that. Okay.
Thank you, Melon. All right. We will now move on to the final response to the question, which will be delivered by Anna Sharak.
Thanks so much. So I guess where I want to start with this question is to back up a little bit, because while it is the school board's responsibility to facilitate communication and be transparent, it's ultimately a huge responsibility of the superintendent and his cabinet and how they lay out decisions and bring stakeholders in to laying out the plans that are being proposed to the school board. And so first and foremost, I want to think about, as a school board member, setting up the guardrails to having a robust external affairs strategy and holding the superintendent accountable to that through working with each school principal and each school team to really pressure test and understand what perspectives have been included in the development of proposed plans as they come forward. Furthermore, I look at excellent examples such as tonight, where Rose and the other students have named the number of questions that have been submitted by the community. What worked in this forum? When we look at the superintendent candidacy search, there were many community members involved, and I understand that took quite a bit of effort, and also that was set up in a way that was very powerful and many voices were heard. I also have to put a call and a charge out to our community of involvement. We talk a lot about transparency and communication, and there are often very few folks who are at the board meetings. And so I really need to learn more about what is preventing that beyond time. Is it structures of communication? Is it other constraints that are disallowing open communications? But with the changes to the new Sunshine Law, I hope that through examining that, we can look at some of those policies as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vaco. We will now begin round 4. The questions in this round pertain to equity and inclusion. For the first question, the 4 candidates answering will be Anna Shurak, Mary Brown, Melanie Schaffmeister, and Travis Pricer. Question 1 is, what additional knowledge do you feel you need in order to better understand how the district can create a more proactive and inclusive special education process for the students and their families? And how would you go about finding out what you need to know? First, we have Anna Shura.
So first and foremost, the additional information I need to understand is to really gain perspective on community reactions to the recent report that was presented as an evaluation of special education in our community. In addition, there are a lot of recommendations that were outlined within the report, and I would want to understand from our administrators and teachers their perspectives on what resonates, what does not, and learn from the incoming superintendent and the outgoing superintendent how they would think about implementing plans. When we talk about equity and inclusion, when we look at the policy that was recently passed by the board, I think it's phenomenal in words, and actually in action is a whole different level of integrity that must be implied, that I do not want us to underestimate what it will take. I think that we are putting many pieces in step, but then I question those as well. When we look at the company that is looking to lead the audit for equity and inclusion, I have questions about the racial makeup of that group and the efficacy in which they were chosen. And I think that all of these issues, special education, students with disability, students who identify with different genders or in different ways, and race play into the challenges within our district that we are only scratching the surface through language, but in action is not impacting the student experience in the ways that it must if we are truly going to make an impact.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Brown.
On my way to from Wynwood to Ardmore on foot today, I took a picture of a lawn sign, and it's very powerful. It says dignity and respect equal inclusion. And we can live by that. We know that we're not providing for all students in Lower Merion School District. And one way we can do that is to speak with our students in the community, to compile research, read it, and use it, and figure out ways in which we can broaden the offerings that we have for students. As Kimberly said earlier, every student isn't an elite, isn't necessarily going to go to college. I think we have to say it and do it. And there are many creative ways, and I know from teaching at St. Joe's that there are many creative ways to provide for every student, not only in the classroom, provide for inclusion, but throughout clubs, throughout musical groups, throughout everything. One more point, Munira Walker in Ardmore has formulated and established a beautiful nonprofit called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. If you get a chance, look into what she's doing. And that is an excellent model for all of us. It's humbling to see what she is doing, and we can learn from that.
Thank you. Next up is Melanie Schaffmeister.
Can I first ask you to repeat the question? I wanted to make sure I'm got the right track.
No problem. What additional knowledge do you feel you need in order to better understand how the district can create a more proactive and inclusive special education process for the students and their families? And how would you go about finding out what you need to know?
Thank you. Actually, I mean, I work at Easter Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania, and that is all about inclusion. Motto is 100% empowered, 100% included. And I think right now with inclusion, we have loud voices. I mean, my daughter has an IEP. She has since 5th grade when her teacher recommended her. But I've thoroughly gone through the evaluation word for word and looked at it. And that was just of the special ed here. And the main thing is that it seems like there's a lot of, when parents know how the system works and how, so no, I'm going to say system, I say special education works, those kids tend to get a better IEP than the kids that parent, and not all cultures and races look to IEPs and special education as there's a stigma associated with it. And I know this from just writing a grant about early intervention for Easter Seals and the thorough research I just did on that. And so to do that, I think we have a map from the evaluation plan, and this established the multi-level type of education that they talked about in the 913 meeting is a good way to start, because you have to build a foundation first with working with all the staff, the teachers, administrators, and the students, and the community members like the parents, the guardians, and to build it and go, and so that we can build a system that's going to be inclusive for all the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Brendan Salmon has requested a 30-second chit to respond to this question. So Brendan, you have 30 seconds.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, real quick, as a researcher in disability discourse, as a father of a child with special needs, as the Lower Merion special needs soccer coach, you hear a mantra that rolls around the community of the beautiful community of persons with disabilities. It's nothing about us without us. So the first thing I noticed, I mean, we should talk to students with disabilities, maybe hear what they are also saying. Give voices to these voiceless members of our community is probably the first step in addressing anything having to do with inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. Next up to answer this question is Travis Kreiser.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is actually one of the areas where our school district has historically, or at least over the past few years, excelled. I mean, number one, we have a larger percentage of students that access special education than many other district holders that weigh in on these issues. I've talked to more than one family who not only moved here because of its reputation for how well we deal with students with special needs, but they could talk to you about the difference in experience as to how we address students with special needs and how they were addressed at maybe a district they left or moved from for job reasons or whatever reason. So I think number one, I think this is one area where we're doing pretty well. Of course, there's always room for improvement. I like the ideas, of course, of speaking to the students who access these needs, to the parents and to the teachers, because they're the ones on the front lines who can best understand how we could best provide additional resources to help the system work even better. Thank you.
Thank you. The four candidates who will answer question 2 are Brendan Salmon, Kerry Sautner, Christina Fink, and Kimberly Garrison. Question 2 is, please share your specific ideas or relevant experience relating to fostering an optimally inclusive culture and learning environment for all, including people of color and LGBTQ+. First up is Brendan Salmon.
So equity identifies a kind of equality of proportionality, and that requires learning and listening to people when they express their unique needs, tailored, if possible, to the person. Now, of course, given the constraints of time and space and energy and resources, it's almost impossible to tailor everything to the person. And that's why we kind of resort to group identities as well. I think we need to be cautious of that, but we need to listen to those groups when they express their needs in order to meet equitably the things that they want to have. My own understanding of this comes not only out of years of experience in education, but again, primarily in my work with students with disabilities, my own son with a disability, and communities of disabilities beyond that even. And so when we talk about trying to include more people, we have to be able to give them a voice. One of the challenges with disability, of course, is that at times you have to be the voice for those who are voiceless, and that requires a very delicate balance between listening to them and then advocating for them. There are other communities whose voices are loud and beautiful, and they should be able to have a say as well, and their voice should be heard. But when we create a community of voices and dialogue, there has to be a kind of condition of trust that is happening and not being forced. And so I would recommend that we be very cautious when we implement mandates for that, because it could end up diffusing the very beauty that we're trying to allow to come to the fore. Thanks.
Thank you, Brendan.
Sorry. Okay, so thank you for the question. A lot of my work really does look at this to ensure how are we doing this in history and civic education. And when I think about all these pieces, you have to build a community of trust within your schools, between your students with each other, and also with your students with your teachers. And there is a lot of practice and a lot of great tools being developed around this. But we also have to be very mindful that there's a lot of poor tools being developed at the same time. So how do we as a community really understand who our students are, what their needs are, and building that community of trust around them and safety? We always go back to Maslow's. Our kids need to feel safe. They need to feel protected. They need to feel safe. They need to feel welcome. That is unbelievably important. Things that can do that, look at our resources. How are we teaching? What are we teaching with? Are we putting diverse perspectives and voices into the resources we choose, from primary sources to videos, to materials, to outings, to places that we engage with that are diverse? And another major one that we can easily move forward is who are teaching our students. Are we modeling our community, our diverse community, with our teachers? The Black Teacher Project is an unbelievable movement that has gone so far in the last few years and is moving it forward. But we also need to build community around our teachers and our school leadership. We cannot just say, oh, we checked the box, we filled in a box there. We need to build support around our students and our teachers and our leadership.
Thank you, Carrie. Next up is Christina Fink.
Okay, so I don't just want to repeat what both Carrie and Brendan said, because they said some very, very good things. But I do want to share personal experience with my son on his IEP. He required assistance, and he needed equity, but he didn't want it. And then I had another young man who was sailing along at Harriton, and he was a person of color, and he was being forced to go to the gatherings at the we'll call it the special room, where a lot of our Black children gathered to talk about their experiences and how to be successful. And he felt that he was being forced into a system when he was perfectly happy not being there to be touted as the person who was doing so well. And so we were sort of creating, we go after equity, and sometimes the person that we're trying to get the equity for doesn't agree with what we're trying to place on them. So I'd say the thing I'm trying to add, and I'm not saying it very well, is that we need to come up with plans to provide equity to the appropriate groups. And then we need to double check ourselves at the door when we actually get feedback from the actual individuals within that group as to whether it's helping them or not. And then we need to be smart enough to understand that sometimes children don't want it and are going to object to it, and they're never going to accept it in the way that we're offering it. And so then we're going to have to be flexible in offering it in another form so that we can help them get to where they need to get to, because that is ultimately our job as parents and educators.
Christina,
and as a
your
community.
time has
That makes
expired.
sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to answer this question is Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for the question. When I think about the word equity, again, for me, it's just best summed up with making sure that every person has their needs met, every student's voice is heard. It's simple for me. That has not been happening. And we just need to get that right. If we get that right, then we'll alleviate a lot of the other problems that students have, social and emotional issues that they have, if we work towards equity for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly. We will now begin round 5. The questions in this round relate to public relations and the board of directors' role in conflict resolution. The 4 candidates answering the first question are Brendan Salmon, Mary Brown, Christina Fink, and Anna Shura. The first question is, what do you see as the school board of directors' role in engaging with the school community, township officials, and community groups to try to prevent conflict and to improve outcomes that could avoid and/or forestall litigation? Are there any changes you would recommend? Please share any specific examples or relevant skills you could offer. First is Brendan Salmon.
Thanks. So I would probably respond to this by hearkening back to the principle of subsidiarity. Obviously, the school board is a leadership group. Their leadership is going to be stronger if they themselves are creating a true community of dialogue. But they have to be very cautious of overplaying their own power, because that ends up, I think, diffusing the very things that they want to do. Often conflict arises because there is this kind of power dynamic that goes on. And so I think the principle of subsidiarity in this case could really prove very fruitful for conflict resolution. It's a principle that I'm very familiar with and have used often in conflict resolution among students. For example, I sat on a board of directors at a condo association. We had to resolve conflicts among residents, and we did that as well. And the idea of the principle of subsidiarity is allowing let's say the more minor authoritative bodies to try to resolve things on their own before immediately intervening. And I think this is just a question of good parenting as well. No good parent is going to be over involved in their child's life. You have to allow for, the people who you govern, or the people you serve, I would say, to be able to handle their conflict resolution as best that they can, intervening when necessary. And so really trying to brainstorm as a group when such interventions are necessary, obviously how they're to be handled, but ultimately respecting this principle of subsidiarity. Thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. Next is Mary Brown.
I want to acknowledge Melanie's contributions thus far. You should all know that she has been outstanding in leading the Federation of Civics. And community members have told us now for years that these communities would like school board members to visit the civic associations and communicate with the people in attendance. It's an easy thing to do. It does raise, though, an issue or an aspect or focus of time. It's been said that in some busy weeks, school board director doing the job well takes 20 hours. And that's a lot of time. It's quite a commitment to attend civic association meetings, to go to commissioners' meetings, and to develop those relationships. That's why it's important that we have people on the school board who have already formed relationships with the various constituencies in our township, in Narberth Borough, which we haven't discussed, and in the school district.
Thank you, Mary. Next is Christina Fink.
Okay, I think again that we need the school board and the commissioners to work better together rather than dislike each other and point to each other as the problem. I think the only way to fix that, it's been a perennial problem. This has been a question that has been on the debate every single time I've ran. So again, you know, however many years I've been running every 2 years, and no one seems to be able to solve it. I still think it takes the community to force the two governing bodies to behave in a different way. So the communities need to be more involved in going to and getting the reports from the school board and the commissioners, and then calling them out when they're actually not doing the job of interacting with the other entity in the proper way, so that there's less conflict, and therefore there doesn't need to be as much conflict resolution, because the culture out there has been that the two bodies really dislike each other and do not get along. I think it's up to the community to somehow figure out a way through liaisons that if you get the truth and then both sides can't really point to each other, I think that would be a start. So that's the only thing I could add on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Next to answer this question is Anna Shurak.
So first and foremost, I don't think that we should be afraid of conflict between the two bodies, because it's inherent that we have different interests as the roles are uniquely different. I think the power and opportunity comes in how we are organizing and proactively putting systems and structures in place to mitigate the deep challenges that come up later when there is disagreement, and proactively sharing what our goals are in order to find where there's common ground and or be really clear on where there's not, gives us a chance to work through those and gain additional perspectives from what to learn from one another. Personally, some experiences I've had that really come to mind are, as an assistant superintendent in Camden, I was integral in leading the planning and development of the building of the new Camden High School, which was extremely political and also had many different interests and needs of the entire community. And so bringing those groups together over a 3-year period in order to have the building built was provided me with much perspective and eye-opening experiences and how to work collaboratively across different entities. Also, in my current role as executive director of Teach for America, I'm constantly bringing together different partners and stakeholders to collaborate towards shared interests. And we don't always see the same way from the beginning, but knowing where one another stands in order to find our collective strength and learn from one another is where there is power in collective collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. The 4 candidates answering question 2 are Carrie Sautner, Melanie Schaffmeister, Kimberly Garrison, and Travis Pricer. Question 2 is, some members of the community have suggested that a significant amount of time, energy, and money from the school district is devoted to litigation. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? What thoughts or suggestions do you have related to this? First on deck is Carrie Sautner.
Thank you. This is a huge issue, and we're all talking about it. And I am excited to hear everybody's comments and opinions on this. But absolutely, It is, and we need to look in all the areas that this is happening. I do believe one of the biggest solutions for this is how do we back up this process so we don't get there? We don't get to, that drawing the line in the sand and saying, okay, we're going to bring the lawyers in. And I have to be honest with you, there's been times in my experience with the school district where I was tempted to think that. And I don't want anybody going through that, because that not only is an unhealthy way to be a part of a community, but it's also an unhealthy way to have advantage and disadvantage. If you don't have the means to do this, then you will never be able to do that. So what do we need to do? Number one, I think we need to look at where this is happening, and are we seeing patterns? Are we noticing things that are higher in some areas than others? And then where can we back up the system and the process so we have more engagement, transparency of the process, and moving people along? It's the skill of building consensus. And consensus building is really difficult. And it means people are going to leave things at the table that they have won and let things go. And that's something you need to do together. When you can build consensus, you're okay with saying, you know what, I didn't get everything I want, but I know you came to this as an honest player. And so all that we've been talking about tonight is trust. And we will have less issues when we have more trust.
Thank you, Carrie. Next is Melanie Schaffmeister.
So glad to follow Carrie, because she says a lot of what I believe, and I just want to build on that, because I mean, I so many times, I mean, especially, in the civic side of things, I hear there's so much distrust of the district in the community. And a lot of it goes from this litigation that people are, people here from the district, sorry, got tongue tied. And I think if we can just take a step back and just look at, like Carrie said, we need to look at why this is happening, how we can fix it, what's leaving there. People feel steamrolled over currently by a lot of the decisions that the district makes. And I think it goes back to the collaboration and the transparency part. Have a conversation first with the people before you come in. There's a feeling that people come with solutions and they're ignored, or the district makes and it looks like they're listening, but not really, and just move ahead as they want. Like the decision's already made when they come to the table. And this is something that we need to, as board members, if we can take a step back and be more collaborative with the community, and that means as one form of government here, of one of the three governments in the local area, between Narberth, between Lower Merion Township, and then the community at large. If we can we need to build trust again. We've got a PR problem, I think, currently in the district. And a lot of that is just taking a step back and building those bridges again. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Next is Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for the question. Litigation is a huge problem in the district. And we're all shooting ourselves in the foot with all this litigation that's going on. It's an enormous expense for taxpayers. And I think whatever we can do to rein in some of this litigation, we should be working towards those efforts. Again, I think if we can get back to transparency and trust, maybe we could minimize some of the litigation that we have. But there are some families and players out there that do know how to play the system to get what they want. And if we dig down into the data, I'm sure we're going to see some patterns of people of certain means are able to get the lawyers, where the other people who are not of means are not able to do that. So again, I think if we get back to trust and transparency, maybe we can minimize some of the litigation issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Next is Travis Pricer.
Thanks so much. So I think, yeah, we all acknowledge that there's probably too much litigation in this district. It seems that, again, it goes back to a theme, I guess, I've had in a lot of my answers, which is there seems to be an arrogance with the recent boards, and it goes back more than 10 years where decisions are made. And even when community involvement is solicited, I think that the impression, as others have noted, is that the decision has really already been made, or once the decision is made, that's the view by the community, that the decision was made, our voices weren't listened to. And so the only way we can have a voice is through the litigation route. It is not only expensive, and there's the direct expense, but it's also very distracting to the entire education process, the board, the administration, and we really need to find a way to avoid it. And one of the ways, I think, again, goes back to another theme that I've had, which is we need to have much better communication and cooperation with the Board of Supervisors. One example would be, and it's been going on for years, the Board of Supervisors has been approving development in the township, a lot of multifamily development. It brings a lot of students, a lot of new students. We see a huge growth in the enrollment recently, and there's no discussion between the school board and the Board of Supervisors about how or where we're going to educate those students. And so we got kind of forced into what I think was a bad decision on a new middle school because we weren't talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. We will now begin round 6. The questions this round will be about budget, funding, and legislation impacting schools. The 4 candidates answering question 1 are Travis Kreiser, Anna Shurak, Kimberly Garrison, and Brendan Salmon. Question 1. The LMSD oversees a budget of over $300 million. Please share your skills and experience relevant to budget decision-making. What is your opinion of our current LMSD budget? Do you have any suggestions for improvements? And what are your top budgetary priorities if elected? First is Travis Kreiser.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have one of the largest budgets, not only from a per pupil basis, but not only in the state, but across the country. I think we can take some lessons, or maybe we need to take some lessons from some of our neighboring districts. Different Easttown, Radnor, they all provide great educational experiences, as we do, but they do it for thousands of dollars less per pupil. So I think we need to look at where we're spending our money. And one of the places we're spending too much of our money is litigation and arguments. So that would be one way we can fix that. Again, I also look at some of the decisions that were made. We made the decision to buy a piece of property for a new middle school that was probably not the best piece of property. It's on the edge of the district. It's opposed by a lot of the community. It was not large enough to really house all the needs of a new middle school. Whereas I think we have some existing school facilities that could be better utilized. They're underutilized right now. I don't think that Welsh Valley Middle School as a piece of property is fully utilized. And I think that we would have been better served and fiscally saved a lot of money if we had found a way to better utilize and develop the Welsh Valley property to expand our middle school capacity rather than buying a piece of property. It's really not that best for the district. Thanks.
Thanks, Travis. Next is Anna Shurak.
Thanks. So I think in terms of our budget and my personal experience in both my current role and previous roles, I have the responsibility of overseeing a similar size budget. And so it's not unfamiliar, the checks and balances and various processes to put in place in order to navigate that with responsibility. When we look at our Lower Merion School District budget, we have an exceptional financial position that's very helpful and aligned with the ratings that we would be aspiring to, as well as a healthy economy and tax base. As I would think about my priorities moving forward, I would pretty much align to where our money is currently going. Some of the many things as parents and community we value in terms of low class size, extensive extracurriculars, numerous enrichment experiences, and enhanced academic supports. What I would really prioritize is how are those aligned to our equity and inclusion policies that are in place. So one thing that was named very much in our special education evaluation spoke to the role of paraprofessionals, also the act of the achievement team. So when we look at our budgetary constraints and how our money is being spent beyond headline items, how are those actually coming into practice in our our schools would be my top priority, to understand where there are efficiencies and where there needs to be better use of resources for the monies that have been allocated towards our most essential focus areas.
Thanks, Anna. Next for this question is Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for the question. In reference to fiscal responsibility, I think it's really important that we realize we do not have infinite resources. I think that sometimes we think, well, the sky's the limit and we'll just keep adding more and more and more. At some point, we have to recognize that we cannot do every single thing. I've served on other boards. They're tough decisions when it comes to money, but we do have to think about how can we optimize what we do have and be more creative without spending endless amounts of money. So I'm really one for kind of pulling back and being really careful about our spending. We have a lot of elderly people in our community who do not have children anymore. This puts a huge burden on those communities. And I don't even think we even think about that. And I do think we need to consider that. So I'm really about, let's be more creative and optimize what we do have instead of spending endlessly. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Next to answer this question is Brendan Salmon.
Thanks so much. I have some background in finances. I was the president of a condo association with over 200 units. We had a budget of roughly $1.5 million, something like this. I've had other roles with finances, but I'll be honest, finance is not my strong suit, and I don't mind admitting it. I would need to learn from my others. I would really need to hear these different people's approaches to finances. I think what's also important that gets overlooked is, again, something we're all endorsing to our credit, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And maybe I'll take a shot across the bow here, but there are 4 wonderful Democrat candidates who, if elected, will constitute a totally Democratic board again. And it's hard to kind of see the authenticity of diversity, equity, and inclusion in that. There have to be some other people from other parties so that much of the problems we have that have resulted in litigation would be minimized. With just one person of different mind on that board, we already, in some sense, get rid of so many of the problems that we're suffering under litigation. As far as budget priorities would go, I would want to hire very effective teachers, more diverse, effective teachers for sure. I would want to give incentives for the arts. The power of the beautiful cannot be underestimated. And when more and more people contribute and engage in and participate in the arts, a flourishing community comes out of that, because it is something so powerful. And I would also like to see more money toward the special needs programs, especially like Best Buddies. Again, this is a principle of unity. If we can gather around our beautiful students with disabilities, all of us from all of our diverse backgrounds, we have a principle of unity that is not oppressive in its being a principle. Thanks.
Thanks, Brendan. We'll move on to question 2. The 4 candidates answering this question are Carrie Sautner, Melanie Schaffmeister, Mary Brown, and Christina Fink. Question 2. One of the Pennsylvania School Board Association's principles for governance and leadership is that the school directors, collectively and individually, will champion public education by engaging members of local, state, and federal legislative bodies. Can you speak to your past experience as well as your readiness and willingness to champion public education? Are there any legislative issues such as cyber school funding, private school busing, charter and voucher school programs, or a fair school funding formula where you hope to affect change? First is Carrie Sautner.
Thank you. And what a great question. It's a really important role. And sometimes we think so much about the pieces that we can, looking at policies that we already have, that say, how much work are we doing at this level? So I am one of the leading members of the PA Civics Association that looks at civic engagement across the state of Pennsylvania. I also work with policy teams across the state to say, how can we affect policy changes in education? Looking at fair funding formula is very important to me. In the last 2 years, I was the vice president of voter services for the League of Women Voters, and that really worked on voter engagement and voter education. So all this work is to try to understand, how do we work together and not just build a system that is effective for Lower Merion, and at work for our community, but how does that community fit into the whole of our state and of our nation? And that is unbelievably important in education right now. What is happening with Act 35, teacher support structures and continuing ed with Act 48, all of this work I do on a daily basis. And I wanna really engage Lower Merion to doing more in the state arena. And this is very, very important. We can work together, we can support each other across the state. We can ensure that our district is doing a strong and effective tools and practices, but at the same time, we can do a lot of amazing things. We need to be a model across the state for other districts as well.
Thanks, Carrie. Next is Melanie Schaffmeister.
Agree. We have the resources that we're receiving in funding to be the model, but we need to work for it. I have actually gone a couple of times to Harrisburg with a friend of mine and talked about the fair funding formula and how we're across the street. Well, where I live, I'm almost across the street from Philadelphia, who is not getting equitable funding to support their students. Yet here we are with more money than we know what to do with, and we're not using it as efficiently and to create an inclusive environment as we can. And I think that this is something that needs to be worked on. I am concerned about, we cannot get movement in Harrisburg to move things along. I mean, funding here in this state is basically heavy on local taxes, and that affects our people on a fixed income the most. The other thing is that, I'm very concerned about our charter school laws. There are great charter schools out there and that are helping and do things that the districts don't do. But it's too easy for charter schools that aren't legitimate to just take the money, and administration takes it and runs away with your taxpayers' money. So those are two issues that I think that I've been to Harrisburg to talk about, and I'm happy to go again. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Melanie. Next for this question is Mary Brown.
I alluded to this earlier. One way to influence education change and to strive and gain equity and inclusion is to urge the PA Department of Education and the PA legislature to re-examine the credit system. So students in the high school, of course, are required to meet a certain number of credits. We can be more creative. I know we are all using that word, but we can be more practical regarding the credit system. There's no reason why a student can't get English and foreign language combined. The other is that for 12 years, I've been the executive director of a 5-state and DC nonprofit education, and we provide funding based on grant applications to private schools, public schools, especially public schools. We have membership ranging 5 states DC. Students are studying with teachers in the high schools and the middle schools, and we grant. So the private sector and nonprofits can also help influence in changing the educational opportunities.
Thank you, Mary. Next for this question is Christina Fink.
So this is a great question. It's actually a more complex question than people think. So I believe the question was, do you support public school? Wholeheartedly. I am all for public school. It is a wonderful system. It provides everybody with the opportunity to be educated. However, our public schools have become in many areas terrible. They've become lazy. They are not doing their job. And so the only way to fix that is to keep a robust layers of competition out there in the marketplace. So I am for charter schools. I am for cyber schools. I am for all of the quality alternatives that present competition to public schools so that we keep our public schools great. No, I am not for charter or cybers that take the money from the school district and then waste it. They don't do a good job. They don't provide the quality of education that is at least up to par in the public schools. But this is actually a complex question because especially for across Pennsylvania, our people of color and our communities of color, they only get sometimes an excellent education or an education that is able to bypass violence and other terrible things in their school district by being able to go to a cyber or being able to go to a charter. So I actually support the marketplace like that, but yes, there are problems and we need to address that. And yes, number one is public school, and we need to keep that robust and fantastic. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'll hand it over to Jack for round 7.
Thank you, Matthew. We will now begin round 7. The questions in this round pertain to the LMSD curriculum. 4 candidates who will be answering the first question are Anna Shurak, Curry Sautner, Kimberly Garrison, and Christina Fink. The first question: what are your relevant skills and experience that qualify you to help shape the curriculum? What steps can be taken towards implementing innovative approaches to teaching and learning, including lessons learned during the pandemic, so that we can effectively prepare our students for skills needed in the 21st century? First, Anna Shurak.
Thanks, Jack. I think first and foremost, really a focus on what our teacher training and development is, and also really acknowledging the great work that our educators are doing under the circumstances over the last 2 years. And so while we've heard of a lot of the negatives and a lot of things that change, there are so many of our educators that are going above and beyond to already be innovative and creative. And so many of our students that are also having a very positive experience being back in person. So really capitalizing on that. In terms of relative experience, I also think there is great opportunity, and as a certified supervisor of curriculum instruction, a former principal, teacher, and assistant superintendent, and someone that trains current teachers and leaders in my daily work now, I think I'm uniquely positioned to work with the principals, superintendent, and administrative teams to provide guidance and perspective on the work that they are putting forth as the best practices that will be in place. But taking it back to the infrastructure of our school, I think that without true alignment to the policies we've named with a commitment to equity, then my personal commitment to anti-racism will not come into effect, because we must discreetly examine not only curriculum and development, the materials and structures we're putting in place in front of our students. We must look at the training that we have that is ongoing and the experience of students in alignment to all of those pieces.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Curry Sautner.
And that's a great ending to jump in on. It's so important that we look at the entire system of a curriculum. It is not just the curriculum that we buy. It's not just the curriculum that we put into place, but it's assessing their curriculum. It's accessing it from the teacher level, from the administrative level, from the special education department, from all the support structures, and from our student as well. So my experience with curriculum, I've been living it for 25 years, where I'm in the middle of developing an entire curriculum plan that will go nationwide, and to really be able to give students access to that in every single state level. I work with teachers across the nation. Last year alone, we trained 2,500 teachers. And this is unbelievable work, because it really is a part of a larger system. How do we support our teachers? How do we support our schools? How do we, most importantly, support our students with the curriculums that we use, the assessment tools that we choose? So unbelievably important. All this work comes together, but I love that you brought up the digital piece, because we have made such leaps and bounds. There were so many setbacks in the last 2 years, but there was a lot of change as well. How can we ensure that this digital divide that we have in our school systems goes away? How do we ensure that they have skills and access? And that is not just the students, but that's also the teachers, continuing that training and continuing to ensure that we're moving our kids and really allowing them to say, we want better and we want more to be in the 21st century.
Thank you, Curry. We'll now hear from Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for the question on curriculum. I don't have enough time to talk about curriculum. I have lots of thoughts about curriculum, but I'm going to keep it simple. One of the things that I see in this district, as well as many other districts across the nation, is we still have a problem with illiteracy in this country. And it's still a problem even here in Lower Merion, where we're graduating students who are not really up to par, despite the tremendous amount of money that we have spent. So I would like there to be an emphasis on the basics, that every child knows how to read and write and do arithmetic. During the pandemic, I had an opportunity to host a pod, and I saw some children who were struggling with their math, and they shouldn't have been struggling with their math because they were 4th and 5th graders. And I saw what was going on and I was shocked. I'm like, why are we teaching it this way when there's a simpler way to do it? So my solution is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We don't need any new curriculum. If the best practices have already been proven, like things like phonics, then implement that, put that in the curriculum so that all of the children will learn how to read, because we have a phonetic language, and that has to be a part, and a big part, especially in early elementary. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Mary Brown has opted to use the chit. You have 30 seconds.
I will advocate for the beauty of our teachers, Brendan. Instead of top-down approaches, which everyone's accessing here, I think we can talk with our teachers. Our teachers spend time every day, every minute, taking care of our children. Instead of dictating curriculum, let's involve teachers more and gain their wisdom and build around what we know works. The love that teachers show for their children forever and ever.
Thank you, Mary. We'll now hear from Christina Fink.
So what Mary said is actually true. I think in the classroom, it is all about the teachers. You get a curriculum and one teacher can present it and bring it alive. And those kids are excited and they're enjoying the class and they're learning. You get another teacher who's not bringing it alive, and those children are not learning the same way. So I do think we really need to focus on constantly having excellent teachers. Curriculum, it's got to be broad, broad, broad. It's got to be diverse, diverse, diverse. It's got to be non-political unless it's a political class. There has to be a curriculum that requires teachers to allow for a safe environment in the classroom for various opinions, whether they are, popular or not. And by having diverse and broad, you create critical thinking with our students. So if you're going to teach Kendi, who's a very popular African-American author today, you better be teaching Shelby Steele, another African-American author, and John McWhorter, who another African-American author. There's plenty of African-Americans that disagree with each other on their worldview. Our children should be able to research implicitly and be able to hear and read both sides of an issue, many, many different perspectives on it. We should not be putting forth in a classroom one way of thinking or another. And we should allow all those children to take all of that into the universe and decide how they stand, but ultimately to be critical thinkers and to be able to communicate with their neighbor, their spouse, their family member, their partner, whether they agree with them or not. And I think that is the objective of curriculum. But I'm not a curriculum expertise person, but I do think we can rely on the experts that we do hire in our township. Thank you.
The four candidates who will be answering the next question are Melanie Schaffmeister, Mary Brown, Travis Kreiser, and Brendan Salmon. The second question: the very personal and often emotional national conversation surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion has taken root in school districts everywhere. What is your position on what constitutes an accurate and inclusive teaching of United States history? Does our current curriculum reflect that? If yes, why? And if not, what should be changed? First, we'll hear from Melanie Schaffmeister.
I'm just an advocate for let's teach the whole history, the good and the bad on both. I mean, I do believe in the transformative education type of things that the strategic plan goes for. That is one of the bodies of it, that you teachers are supposed to have open-ended questions. They're supposed to engage the students, let them, I know in my daughter's government class, the teacher is having them each read and listen to a podcast of their choice and on a topic, and then they come back in and with the summary, and they have and develop conversation in the classroom about their views. And that to me is what we need. I believe we could do better on a worldview of things. There's very little done on we do a lot, and of course we're the United States, and we want our history all about United States and that, but I think we need a better broad perspective of education a broader perspective of history outside of the area. And so I think we've got good starts. I think they're doing that. The curriculum is doing okay. We have to, and we're needing to with the Act 35 stuff for here, but I think we could do better. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mary Brown.
I want to acknowledge Kimberly's response on vote 411. Kimberly, it was fabulous to read what you had said about history and how important it is to give an accurate, as Melanie says, the good and the bad. And I agree. I think that we should together and in collaboration with our teachers and our students, investigate the ways in which we are presenting history so that it is fair, it is open-minded, and there are points of view expressed. One technique that I use, and I've used since I taught at Lower Merion, is this persona project. Each student gets to pick an ancient persona to be that person and researches and presents to the class. And the conversations that are generated based on student choice are amazing. I learned so much when I hear what students have researched. I did this at Lower Merion for years, and now I'm doing it at St. Joe's, of course. And it's a way of opening up through choice and through student-based research and selection, that freedom of choice and the freedom of expression and the freedom of academic expression.
Thank you, Mary. We will now hear from Travis Kreiser.
Thank you. I think I largely agree with the comments that kind of came before me. I think that when we teach history, we need to teach the entire history, of course, the good and the bad. We have plenty of plenty of errors that we've made over the years in our history, and they need to be taught. They need to be taught so, as we say, we don't repeat these things. But I think there's a way that we can do it so that we can also be proud and teach pride in our country, pride in how far we've come, pride in the fact that we have a country that has a system that allows us to come as far as we've come, pride in the fact that we're a front runner rather on issues of race and equality across the world. And that's why people from other countries want to come here, and when they're here, they don't want to leave. So I think we can teach history and its mistakes and its errors, but in a way that also allows students to be proud about the country that they live in. And when you talk about that, I mean, some teachers get it right and some teachers don't. And this past year, my daughter was a senior. She graduated this past year, but because of the pandemic and the distance learning, I got to hear how some teachers did it right and some did it wrong. And in particular, her government class was great. He was a moderator. It was appropriate because it was a class of seniors doing government. And they talked openly about issues, and people were free to express their views about different things without a condemnation one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. We will now move to the 8th round.
I don't think I got a chance to speak, or wasn't on that? Sorry.
Oh, I apologize. Excuse me. Yes, we will now hear from Brendan Salmon.
Thanks. So I want to make a point. I stressed at the Civic Wynwood Association that, and it was disagreed with, I forget by whom, but it was disagreed with shockingly. History, I mean, a person's history is in excess of their own ability to recall it. World history and a history of a nation is even more in excess, which means that to really do justice to the truth of it, you need a diverse community of voices. Without that, you end up with going to one of two extremes. Either you get a mythic nationalism, which promotes the good of a nation at all costs, and that's not something that's very effective for flourishing. And then you avoid the extreme of sort of national self-deprecation, which is equally harmful to a nation. We need a kind of balanced picture there. And if this is a kind of subtle or a veiled question on critical race theory, look, critical race theory has a profound value, but its value can only come out in dialogue with its others. It will be challenged and its value will be shown to be what it is, or else it will have to rethink some of its ideas, just like everything else. I was deeply impressed in my own formation by Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. He's a Marxist historian. It's a profound text, and it really challenged a lot of the simple ideas that I was given growing up with mythic nationalism. But he doesn't have the final say either. And what it showed is this tremendous beauty of history that requires diverse communal voices to really do justice to it. Every voice ought to be heard in that sense. And so that's where I would stand on
that. Thank you, Brendan. Anna has elected to use a chit. Anna, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Jack. So I just want to bring up a few points. First of all, we live in a predominantly white district in one of the most affluent cities and areas in the state. And so that within itself tells us that the curriculum needs to constantly be revisited, and the accurate history from which we are learning needs to be considered. The practices in which our students are learning are based on white dominant culture and a fundamental belief that should not negate counter perspectives or conversations, but need to accurately reflect the history that this nation is built on. With the Department of Education recently implementing the Pennsylvania culturally relevant sustaining education competencies for certification, it will require our district to fundamentally change how we are updating curriculum, training teachers, and holding our educators accountable. And that will be a role that this board must play.
Thank you, Anna. And we apologize that we are running a bit over time, but we will now proceed to round 8. Albert Einstein said, to raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination. The next questions pertain to preparing for the future. The 4 candidates who will be answering the first question are Curry Sautner, Melanie Schaffmeister, Mary Brown, and Christina Fink. The first question: please share your thoughts on innovative ways to address the needs of our school community with respect to facilities and land use, specifically with regard to climate change and being environmentally conscious. First, we'll hear from Curry Sautner.
I love these questions. You know where the real question is underneath it, and it's coming out in the general question. Love it. So I have to be very clear and transparent. I absolutely, wholeheartedly, in everything I do, believe that we need to take some environmental moves that are very strong and very clear. When we look as a district and we talk about space, we talk about building schools and building fields, we need to be very mindful that we're not just saying this space is being taken over and somebody else would have done it anyway. We're doing that with taxpayer money. We're doing that for the whole of the community. And is this what the community wants and what we believe in as a community? And it matters what the choices we make and how our students are engaged in those choices and see us model that behavior. We have to follow rules. We have to follow and make sure things are fair and appropriate in our sports and in our buildings. We cannot negate the policies that we must follow, but I think we need to be unbelievably creative. And my really simple way of being creative is get out there and walk around. I go for runs in every weird lot in this entire district, looking for spaces that aren't filled with glorious trees that have been there forever, that maybe we can able to put a field there. Where are we going to put buses if we need more buses? How are you going to be able to move people there without unbelievably disrupting the community? But then what things are we going to have to let go of because we can't have it all? We have to have compromise and consensus building. So that means some things will stay and some things will go. Sorry.
Next, we'll hear from Melanie Schaffmeister.
So true. It's so difficult right now when you have like the highest growing district in the state, and you're trying to find a place to put them all. I have been there from the start of that conversation, and it's like we have people coming to the superintendent, bringing Like, can we put something there? Can we put something here? I mean, I personally did that. Like, what about this old school? What about this old, it took a long time to get to the point we're at right now. But unfortunately, I don't know that it's a good direction we're going. Environmentally, I mean, the school district has a thing that of supporting our environment, and we need to support. Climate change is so real. We're seeing the storms hitting our houses, flooding our basements, and when we have impervious surface, we have a zoning code that actually increased impervious surface in many areas, which is a problem. And so we need to be not concerned about just the district. We need to be concerned about the neighbors around it, and what we do affects them. I know we have to prioritize our students, but we need to find compromise. Like Curry says, it can't be all or nothing. We need to find compromise. And I think we need to look to the community to say, let's come up with a plan together. How can we figure this out and put aside distrust and prior disagreements. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. We'll now hear from Mary Brown.
Step 1, do not schlep kids from Penn Win from one end of the district to Villanova. Step 2, respect neighborhoods. There's a cul-de-sac in the Rosemont-Villanova area, which the school board would like to plow through to open up access for buses and fans to access the non-existent athletics fields. Next one, do not damage the tree canopy. There is on the table a move to deforest the athletic fields on the properties that are contiguous or next to 1860 Montgomery Avenue. That's abominable that we would support killing 500 heritage trees. We should go for another elementary school. Travis is right. That school is very, very questionable. We need another elementary school. We need kindergarten full day, not a kindergarten center. We need children close to home with their parents, young children close to home with their parents. We have serious decisions to make, and we need to include the community, the families, Narberth Borough included, and get something done. We have litigation against us about that cul-de-sac. That's ridiculous. We can talk with people. It does take time. It takes a commitment by the school board to go to civic association meetings, to go to school meetings, to meet in the community along with our new superintendent.
Thank you, Mary. We'll now hear from Christina Fink.
I think this is an area where we can really think out of the box and we can start moving in a different direction. I think if you look at the buildings that we've built like Harriton, they're beautiful, but the use of the square footage in that building is ludicrous. The hallways, they don't need to be huge and wide and all this extra, space. We could have more classrooms in there. It could be a more densely classroomed arena. When we put together a auditorium, there should be dividers to be able to divide that auditorium down into different smaller classroom spaces. So we have the ability to add classrooms as we go up in population or go down. We should utilize outside classroom space during the nice weather. We should have our children outside in the nicer weather, and there should be some outside classroom space. Again, flexible classrooms, they should be usable in many different ways. Solar, we should definitely use solar. We should make sure there's a whole lot more trees on our properties where they can be. We should make sure that there are more meadows like we have around Harriton. All those extra medians and all those areas are meadows. Well, that allows for a better environment. It allows for the bees, it allows for the birds. It actually protects the ground from getting heated up. We should be permitted to do taller buildings for schooling. So basically we need to work with our commissioners and make sure that our buildings go up further and they don't go out. We should have less impervious cover so that we can absorb more groundwater. We can grow more trees. We can have more meadow. We need to insist upon native plantings only. Our birds and our other nature do not function on non-native plantings. And last item is buses. I think we can do a lot more with buses, and sometimes it means reducing our buses. And I have some thoughts on that, but my time's up. Bye.
Thank you. Kimberly Garrison has opted to use a chit. Kimberly, you have 30 seconds.
I just wanted to say that I agree with much of what Christina Anne Mary Brown had to say in reference to that, green spaces matter for all of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Kimberly. The four candidates who will be answering this question are Kimberly Garrison, Anna Shurak, Brendan Salmon, and Travis Kreiser. The second question: Lower Merion School District has historically been known as a leader in education. As a school board director, how would you proactively ensure that Lower Merion stays on the cutting edge? We encourage you to share any creative ideas you may have. First, Kimberly Garrison.
Thank you for that question. I think maintaining being a leader in education is, again, looking at the old to recreate some new. For example, since we're in the middle of this pandemic, I think it would have been really cool if we could have considered creating like a forest school, especially for our elementary school students. I mean, it could be done at any age, but I think particularly there's so much opportunity for them to learn outside and be in real time with science. You can read a book under a tree. I just think it's just so many wonderful things that you can do outdoors in nature that would enhance the children's education exponentially. So that's what I would do. Go back and look at the old stuff and say, hey, how can we think this strategy and also minimize our expenses at the same time by using some of the old tried and true methods. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. We will now hear from Anna Shurak.
Thanks, Jack. Similarly to what Kimberly was saying, instruction is instruction. So when we think about best practices, well, there are lots of innovations to methods and different offerings. I think that for us to maintain being a leader, it's going to take us exploring where are student interests and how do we bring our teaching education and practice up to 21st century and beyond, and how are we meeting the needs of students to be ready for college or career once they are in 12th grade, so that they are really truly able to do whatever they choose to. I think this comes down to our course offerings, our integrative curriculum, having more classes and electives that align, exploring how offerings at Harriton and Lower Merion can also be integrated, and looking all the way down to the middle school, how we can create continuums of learning that prioritize students' interests while also exposing a multitude of learnings and different opportunities to students. And also with the vast diversity of perspectives and expertise within our community, I think there's a huge opportunity to also look at what other programs can we integrate through local businesses and other adults who live in our community and or have come back or are willing and able to help.
Thank you, Anna. We'll now hear from Brendan Salmon.
Thanks. This is a really interesting question, I think. One of the elements of all learning that often goes overlooked is something called habits of mind. And I think one innovation that might serve to really sort of help communities of education flourish would be to do a little bit more rigor with habits of mind. And by that, I mean sort of thinking in ways that go beyond the sort of rational discursive ways we've been taught to think, which are of course valuable, but in our post-Enlightenment Western society, we've sort of absorbed this ability to reason discursively to the neglect of how we might reason aesthetically, how we might have different ways of thinking, neurodiversity. And so to that end, I would say there's two elements I would focus on. Number one, the community of students with disabilities. Again, there's a habit of mind among so many of our beautiful students with disabilities. There's diverse habits of mind, of course, but there's a unique way of approaching the world that I think offers profit to all of us if we but are able to see it, and that requires a little bit of effort. And then secondly, the arts. The human arts in all of their glory and their splendor carry within themselves a kind of way of thinking and a logic that you don't quite get from STEM. And of course, I would want to encourage more of that. It's unfortunate when schools start to suffer financially, the first thing they cut are the arts. I think that is such a suicidal thing for a community to do. The ideal, of course, would be to put the arts along with the STEM and then to sort of center it on maybe the community of students with disabilities. And I think this would be such an innovation to really start focusing on our habits of mind in that sense.
Thank you, Brendan. We'll now hear from Travis Kreiser.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, when I moved to this district, it was mentioned by some of the other candidates, but when I moved to this district, I moved here because of the reputation of the school district. And I wanted to provide the opportunity for the best possible education for our children. I think we do that pretty well on a lot of fronts. I think that our reputation as a leading school district is a little bit tarnished, or we have distractions from it because we're more in the news about litigation or controversial curriculum choices and things like that. So I think we need to roll back, focus on the basics, make sure that we're teaching the basics and making them as best as we can. I've heard Mary Brown talk about, and I'm in favor of what her concept of maximizing flexibility through the credit system and also leveraging our local colleges and universities. I mentioned my daughter's situation where I tried to advocate for her through the administration and then through the superintendent's office. And it ties in with what Brendan was talking about in terms of the arts. My daughter very much enjoyed her participation in the music arts. Unfortunately, in her senior year, she wasn't going to be able to participate in the music arts because it conflicted with the government class. We requested that the government class was canceled the prior 2 years, so she wasn't able to take it over the summer. We requested permission that she take it online or through a local college and university, and it was denied, which didn't make sense because, as it turned out, basically everyone took it online once the pandemic occurred. So that's the kind of inflexibility that we need to bring an end to. Thanks.
Thank you, Travis. And Christina would like to use a chit. Christina, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. An excited student is a good student, is an overachieving student. We need to excite our students about learning. I think we are not connecting what they're learning in the classroom to real life. We need to constantly make the connection. We need to do more physical things in the room. We need to have more physical activities, everything from, projects that are hands-on to getting out into nature and being outside to going on field trips. What the heck happened to field trips? My oldest kid had plenty of them. My youngest kid had none of them. And this is it's ludicrous. So I think we need to excite our children. We need to make them so excited about learning, and we need to just inspire that. And then ultimately end up with a fabulous overachieving child. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running over time, and viewers are reminded that this video recording will be saved both on Harrison TV, on the YouTube channel, and on the League of Women Voters website. But we will now move to closing statements. Thank you to all the candidates who spoke. Brendan, I believe you already used 2 chits. Only one? Okay, then.
I just want to use the last one. Yeah, just to say thank you to Alana, to all the students. I'm not getting a chance to, Alana, especially Alana, just sitting there doing the time so well. Way to go. So thank you to all you students for this. I just wanted to be able to get that in.
Thank you so much, Brendan. We appreciate it. We'll now move to the 2-minute closing statements delivered by each candidate in the following randomized order. Travis Kreiser, then Brendan Salmon, Anna Shurak, Mary Brown, Kimberly Garrison, Christina Fink, Curry Sautner, and Melanie Schaffmeister. First, we'll hear from Travis Kreiser.
Thanks. I want to return to a theme that kind of came back again and again during our discussion tonight. In my opening statement, I talked about wanting to bring a sense of diversity of opinion and thought to school board decisions. The first and foremost goal will be to continue all of the things that Lower Merion does well, and there are lots of things they do well, but focus on developing some better decision-making processes for decisions as we move forward. So that goes hand in hand. Good decision-making goes hand in hand with ensuring that we have full participation by all stakeholders with all views. This is one area where, again, I think the board has fallen short. 2 reforms I think would go a long way toward making this better. First, we need a closer and more cooperative working relationship with the Lower Merion Township Board of Supervisors. And we talked about or I already talked earlier tonight about the decisions involving the new school, the new middle school, and how I think that if we had a longer horizon and if we had addressed the issue of the growing enrollment with the township supervisors years ago, we could have ended up with a much better location and a much better situation for our students. Unfortunately, I think it just needs, we need the school board to reach out to the supervisors, kind of end the controversial relationship and the adversarial relationship, and make them understand that that having good schools and good schools that work is a benefit to the community. It's a benefit to the development, and vice versa. It's really not that we have diverse interests. We have the same interests. And I think if we can all realize that, we'll end up with better decisions. The second point is that we have better community buy-in, better, more transparent decisions, and more community involvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. We'll now hear from Brendan Salmon.
Thanks so much. As I noted in my opening statement, my candidacy rests on a foundation of building communities of trust by giving a voice to the voiceless, and this takes place in 3 fundamental elements. First is transparency. When a school board consists of only one political party, it is much easier for them to make decisions among themselves behind closed doors and perform a theater of conversation for the public, which is what we've seen played out. This creates distrust among the public for the voice of the school board, seeing it as more of an authoritarian than an authentic voice. I've heard from many constituents that this lack of transparency continues to be a problem. A more transparent school board is a vital element for reestablishing trust among those we would serve. Second, availability. Effective service requires making oneself available to those they serve, thus providing to those being served a voice in the decision-making. This is especially important for the voices of parents, without whom the entire education structure falls apart. Moreover, there are many underrepresented areas of Lower Merion, such as Penwyn, where I live, and I will serve as a point of equity for these areas. A school board that is more available to its constituents is a school board that creates trust by allowing those who want to be heard to have an authentic voice. And then finally, curriculum. All fields of human inquiry are saturated with meaning. Whether the field is history, literature, or any of the natural sciences, each of these fields of inquiry are constituted by more meaning than any one single voicing can effectively convey. A curriculum that creates communities of trust recognizes the need for diverse voices in all human inquiry. Most importantly, it allows voices that have been marginalized to be heard alongside other voices, creating a community of voices that is inherently beautiful. But no one voice can become the total voice of authority. No one interpretation can justly claim to be the only way to see things. Instead, we must encourage and incentivize diverse voices to speak in dialogue with one another. We must encourage a form of dialogue that really hears others, even opposing voices, because it is only through such opposing voices that the beauty at the heart of any field of inquiry is able to grow and mature, and in that dialogue to become more effective voices for those they aspire to uplift. Thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. We'll now hear from Anna Shurak.
Over the past 2 years, the education system has endured such lasting changes and long-term effects that none of us could have ever predicted. When we think about the road ahead, what we are tasked with navigating, healthy start times, litigation, inclusion, equity and anti-racism, relationship with commissioners, checks and balances, curriculum, changing state laws, responsibility, and first and foremost, stressed and anxious students who are exhausted. This is no small task. As we have formed a slate, I don't think it should be underestimated the power in us demonstrating the collaborative approach that all 4 of us will take to leading as school board directors, and how we will be committed to working together to further the perspectives of our parents, our community, and the goals of our district. As an education leader for nearly 20 years, while I'm uniquely positioned to provide perspective, it's not lost on me the amount of reflection and learning that will be required for me to do this job effectively. I am committed to doing the best job possible and know that through working collaboratively with my fellow board directors in the community that we can make the change that will be required. I think it is a privilege that on this panel tonight, we did not have to address many of the issues that are plaguing school boards and districts across this country. And that if we go back to the way things were prior to the pandemic, that will be the greatest lost opportunity for us as leaders in demonstrating what is possible when we can align as a community and what must be true for our students and our collective future. Thank you for voting for our Democratic slate.
Thank you, Anna. We will now hear from Mary Brown.
I'm not campaigning. What I would like to say is that we have 8 excellent, well-prepared candidates, and it is truly a privilege. And I see you smiling, Kimberly, and I know it's great. We have so many accomplishments, but we have so many things to do. I want to refer to Brendan's comment earlier. Nothing about us without us. That's a very important thought, and it has a spirit to it. And I would like us to say that to each other, that it is nothing about us without us. And that includes the children, the students, the parents, the community, the commissioners. Most important, in a nuts and bolts approach to governing our school district, including the borough of Narberth, is availability. The most important ability is availability. This will take time. All the words we share together will take hours of careful, committed dialogue, searching for beauty in each one and working towards that. One possibility is if the Rosemont-Villanova neighborhood wins their lawsuit blocking the school district from plowing through their little pocket park in Rosemont area, Villanova, then that mansion next to it could become a STEAM center. Brendan, I'm going to follow what you had said. We could use more opportunities for hands-on experience, experiments, and research with students. We could have STEAM there at the mansion. I've been there, it's usable, and we know that many schools in the area have repurposed mansions for other things. We cannot really schlep kids from Penn Win to Villanova on bad roads. We have to care about the children. And in some, I will bring 48 years of working and serving the Lower Merion and Narberth in so many ways to serve our children, build relationships, and show that we care.
Thank you, Mary. We'll now hear from Kimberly Garrison.
In closing, I think we all agree that we want to improve education for all of our children. I recognize that we are fortunate to live in a community where education is number one. But each year, we face tough decisions on how to allocate our resources. Each year, we face tough decisions like which programs will be funded and cut, and we propose new initiatives or not. I believe together, we can find creative solutions to address the many challenges we face while maintaining the superior quality of education we have come to expect. With our new superintendent, I am hopeful that with fresh eyes and new perspectives, the next few years will produce some cost-efficient innovations and new initiatives. In our community, we value a world-class education, and we are able to provide that education. However, I am committed to continued improvement and to taking our education system to an even higher level. It would be an honor to serve on the Board of Education in Lower Merion, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kimberly. We'll now hear from Christina Fink.
Thank you. I am asking for your vote in November for Lower Merion School Board. I am a moderate Republican married to a Democrat. I love working with people of diverse opinions and perspectives. Diverse thinking with constructive discourse creates our best government. Your school board for almost 20 years has been only Democrats. If you want great government, you need to actively sprinkle in a few members of the other party or other parties to push your Democrats to think full circle, and it does give all of us best government. Let's get to work helping our children enjoy learning and being fascinated in the classroom. Indoctrination and politicizing the classroom ruins our children's environment to learn with joy and peace. I am for a 360-degree education, teaching all perspectives and opinions with no bias. That means if you're reading popular African-American author Kendi, then you better be also reading African-American author Shelby Steele or John McWhorter. These Black scholars do not agree, so which voices do we teach? I say we teach all of them. I want to keep schools open for in-person learning. I say yes to diversity. I say yes to inclusion for all, but we need to be very, very careful about the use of equity. The ultimate freedom is true equality. Once you divide everyone up into special groups based on race, gender, sexual orientation, special needs, etc., and give all those groups different rules, different services, different benefits based upon their group, we could take this too far and it could become discrimination. Yes, special needs children need to have equity, and I do believe in equity. There's a place for it, but let's not be too hasty in assigning different rules and benefits to people based upon different things. We need to be very, very thoughtful here, and we need to be very, very fair. I want to improve education for all our children. I want to spend very carefully as our taxes are very high. I want to improve our technical and trade paths, and it's time to figure out kindergarten. Full day kindergarten. Please put a few different thinkers from a different tribe on your school board. You have 9 Democrats who for the most part think alike and do tend to be all drinking the same Kool-Aid. My father once said, one party rule is only good for a fool. And if you want your best government, I say, please sprinkle in a few Republicans and others onto your school board. Thank you very much, and I hope for your vote.
Thank you, Christina. We'll now hear from Curry Saltner.
Thank you. I really wanted to start off with the idea that the school board is there to build bridges between the community, between the schools, between the students, and between all the members of the community. And it is a non-partisan position. And so we should come at this as members of the community. I have been a member of this community for years and years. I grew up in this community. I left, and guess what? I came back home. I came back home with a ton of experience in education. I've been living here for over 10 years in the community, and I will represent everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. I want to hear your voice. I've been a part of the Narberth Civic Association. I've served on the Civil Service Commission in Narberth. I've been a part of the Philadelphia NPA State League of Women Voters, and I work in a national education organization. I grew up in Ardmore. I've lived in Narberth. I've lived in Gladwin. My kids have been to Belmont Hills, all over at all different schools. And that gives me so many perspectives. But one thing that I truly love to do is communicate with everybody. And I am telling you right now, I am going to bring my experiences to the table, my passion to the table, and I'm going to engage the entire community with openness, but also with humility. Because I do not think the school board can answer all the questions and should never be like that. What is the humility we can bring to the table and say, what do you want? What do you need? How do we bring you all together and really facilitate goals in communications to build trust, stakeholder engagement, and milestones? We haven't talked about setting goals. We haven't talked about putting in outcomes and outputs that make things measurable. How do you know if we're going to do well if we don't give you the goals that we're going to achieve as a school board? All these issues that we have could continue for years or could move on. We need to be a school board that has vision to really ensure high quality listening, engagement, and accountability.
Thank you, Curry. We'll now hear from Melanie Schaffmeister.
Okay, last one on the bunch, and I'm sure everybody is ready to want to go. Okay, so I thank you for everyone for your hard work tonight to put this forum together, and the questions and this opportunity. And no matter whether we agree or disagree, I am so appreciative for everyone's efforts and interests surrounding our school district and how we can support our students along with our community. We've all had a tough time over this last year and a half that has exposed so many inequities for members of our community. And one area where we need equity is in our public schools. I am not a one-issue candidate. My experience has given me perspective to look at institutions as a whole. As you can see tonight, the school district has many moving parts as the prior candidates have listed. And I stress how we need to work together to help support a rewarding educational environment. My volunteer background provides me a knowledge of the school district and the larger community. My career has given me perspective from the institutional level and how best to support in context of many variables. I am a systems person. I think about data. I want to look at how we can use this data to move our district forward. I know there's sometimes tough decisions to have and hard decisions that may not please everyone. And I also know that I would be a one voice at the table, but whatever that decision I make, it will be an informed decision, consider the best interest of our students, balance impact of the community at large while supporting our students in a transparent and collaborative environment. As I believe our community is stronger with a strong public schools district, and our public school system is stronger with community support. I would be honored if given the opportunity to support our students and community, and I would be honored if you give our entire slate that opportunity. We connected right away as a group, committed to move the district forward. We challenge one another to see different perspectives as board members who want to help.
Thank you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to all the candidates for those closing statements. I'll now turn it over to Jamie Mogul.
Wow, we made it through. Thank you to, yes, this would be the time we would say, please give a round of applause. You all deserve it. I know we're in this virtual world, but we all are showing the clapping hands and so forth. And I hope everybody at home is watching. Yes, thank you, everybody. I see you're putting in Zoom the clapping hands. So really, thank you so much. It's a testament to you and to your commitment to the community. This is, after all, a unpaid, you're running for office, but this is an unpaid position. So we want to let people know that is how much you are dedicated to this community. So again, thank you to the students for moderating, timekeeping. Alana, you killed it. And to Adam, who's doing our live streaming from Harridan TV, to the ISC and all the other co-sponsor groups. We really are all better informed as to you, the candidates, and your platforms. We encourage you to remind your friends, your neighbors, your relatives to check their registration at vote.pa.gov. The last day to register, October 18th. If you're 18 by election day, November 2nd, please, you get to vote. And make your plan to vote, whether that's in person or by mail. You have options. And learn more about the candidates at the League's trusted nonpartisan resource, vote411.org. And again, the deadline to apply for vote by mail is October 26th. So on behalf of all the organizing groups, the students, and our co-sponsor groups, we want you to remember to vote on November 2nd. It's your voice and it matters. Thanks so much and have a good night.